Hello and welcome to World War Lab. Today's story takes us high above the Pacific, to a single mission where survival came down to seconds, frozen metal, and one young gunner facing impossible odds. At 11:42 on the morning of January 27, 1945, Staff Sergeant Raymond Chen crouched behind the central fire control station of the B-29 Superfortress Aquila 52, watching a film of oxygen frost creep across the plexiglass as the formation clawed its way through 28,000 feet of sky over the Pacific Ocean. He was 22 years old. He had flown 11 combat missions over Japan. He had 0 confirmed kills. Japanese radar stations had already detected the incoming bombers. Intelligence warned that at least 40 enemy fighters were being scrambled to intercept the morning strike on Tokyo. Chen was the youngest gunner in the 497th Bombardment Group. His gloved hands rested steadily on the controls that linked him to 4 remotely operated gun turrets mounted along the B-29's fuselage. Each turret carried twin .50 caliber machine guns. He had fired them twice in combat over Nagoya and once along the Japanese coast. He had never seen a fighter go down. The 73rd Bombardment Wing had been flying out of Saipan since November, and every mission followed the same brutal pattern. High-altitude precision bombing runs at 28,000 to 30,000 feet. Temperatures plunging to 50 degrees below zero. Jet stream winds so violent that bombardiers struggled to correct their aim. And Japanese fighters climbing to meet them every single time. By mid-January, the wing had lost 31 B-29s to fighters and flak. 31 aircraft meant 31 crews. 340 men. The worst losses had come on January 14 over Nagoya, when 5 superfortresses were destroyed in less than 20 minutes. Just as German Panther and Tiger tanks had taught American tank crews about inferior armor, Japanese interceptors were now teaching B-29 crews the hard limits of altitude. The Nakajima Ki-44 could climb to 28,000 feet in under 8 minutes. American intelligence called it the Tojo. Japanese pilots knew it as the Shoki. The translation was Devil Queller, and the name fit. The Ki-44 carried either 4 12.7mm machine guns or 2 20mm cannons. At high altitude, where the air was thin and B-29 gunners struggled with frozen mechanisms and oxygen deprivation, a single interceptor could make multiple firing passes with relative impunity. Worse still were the ramming attacks. Beginning in August 1944, Japanese pilots had started deliberately colliding with B-29s after expending their ammunition. This was not kamikaze doctrine. It was desperation math. 1 fighter for 1 bomber was considered an acceptable exchange when the bomber cost $600,000 and carried 11 men trained for 6 months. The 47th Sentai, based at Naramesu Airfield near Tokyo, operated a specialized air superiority unit that practiced this tactic. American intelligence estimated the unit had destroyed at least 3 B-29s through ramming attacks and damaged 7 more so severely they were written off after crash landings. Aquila 52 was carrying 6 tons of high-explosive bombs in her belly. The target was Tokyo's port facilities. Weather reconnaissance aircraft had reported clear skies over the primary target. That meant visual bombing. That meant the formation would need to hold perfectly steady during the bomb run. And that meant enemy fighters would have time to line up ideal firing angles. Chen had been briefed on the odds that morning at 0400 hours. 62 B-29s would take part in the strike. Intelligence predicted 9 would not return. If you want to see how Chen and his crew survived what came next, please hit that like button. It helps us share more forgotten stories from World War II. Subscribe if you haven't already. Back to Chen. The formation crossed the Japanese coastline at 11:58. Radar operators on Honshu picked them up immediately. Air raid sirens began wailing across Tokyo. At Naramesu Airfield, pilots sprinted toward fighters already warming on the flight line. At exactly noon, the first Ki-44s lifted off and turned southeast toward the incoming bomber stream. 43 fighters. Aquila 52 was about to face more enemy aircraft than any B-29 had encountered on a single mission. The first fighter appeared at 12,000 yards. Chen saw it through the optical sight as a dark speck climbing almost vertically through scattered cloud layers. The speck grew larger. Wings became visible. Then the unmistakable radial engine cowling of a Ki-44. The fighter rolled inverted at 27,000 feet and dove toward the lead element of the formation. 3 more followed close behind. Chen rotated his upper forward turret to track the diving attack. The remote control system allowed him to aim guns mounted 15 feet away from his position. An onboard analog computer corrected for airspeed, altitude, and the B-29's forward motion. The technology was revolutionary. It was also temperamental at 50 below zero. The lead Ki-44 opened fire at 800 yards. Tracers arced toward the formation. Chen pressed the firing button. The turret hammered. Streams of .50 caliber rounds tore through the air at 2,800 feet per second. The Ki-44 snap-rolled left and vanished beneath the formation. No hits. The fighter had broken off too quickly. By 12:07, the formation was fully engaged. Fighters attacked from every quadrant. The standard tactic was a high side pass from 11 o'clock, diving through the formation at nearly 400 miles per hour, then braking sharply left or right to escape the B-29's overlapping defensive fire. Individual fighters rarely pressed attacks to point-blank range. Ramming attacks were different. The aircraft commander called out a contact at 2 o'clock high. Chen swung the upper turret. A Ki-44 was lining up for a beam attack. Range 700 yards. The fighter's nose tracked Aquila 52 with chilling precision. Chen led the target and fired a 3-second burst. Armor-piercing incendiary rounds walked directly across the fighter's flight path. The Ki-44's engine detonated. Black smoke erupted from the cowling. The aircraft rolled inverted and fell away trailing flame. First confirmed kill. Chen didn't celebrate. 2 more fighters were already maneuvering into position. The B-29's right blister gunner engaged one with twin .50s. The tail gunner shouted out a contact closing fast from 6 o'clock low. The central fire control system allowed Chen to slave the lower aft turret to his sight. He tracked the target, fired, and missed. The tail gunner took over, stitching rounds across the Ki-44's wing root. The fighter shuddered. Pieces of aluminum. The skin peeled away. The aircraft snapped into a flat spin. A second kill was credited to Aquila 52. The formation reached the initial point for the bomb run at 12:19. This was the moment of maximum vulnerability. The bombers would have to fly straight and level for 6 full minutes while bombardiers synchronized their Norden bomb sights. Course changes were forbidden. Evasive maneuvers were impossible. The fighters knew it. 14 Ki-44s assembled 3,000 feet above the bomber stream. They circled once, then again, carefully spacing themselves, positioning for a coordinated assault meant to overwhelm the B-29's defensive fire. At 12:21, they rolled in. Chen counted them through his sight. 1, 2, 3, 4. Fighters diving in paired attacks from 10 o'clock high and 2 o'clock high at the same time. Textbook execution. The formation's gunners would be forced to split their fire. Individual B-29s would face multiple attackers with weakened defensive coverage. The first pair opened fire at 1,000 yards. Chen engaged the lead fighter. His tracers converged with streams from 2 other superfortresses in the formation. The Ki-44 flew straight into the combined wall of rounds. Its canopy shattered. The fighter snap-rolled to the right and collided with its wingman. Both aircraft disintegrated in a flash of debris. 3rd and 4th kills. But the second attacking pair had used the chaos as cover. 2 Ki-44s were now inside 500 yards and closing fast. Their cannons were firing. Chen could see the muzzle flashes. He swung his sight to track the nearest fighter. The Ki-44 wasn't breaking off. It wasn't jinking or rolling. The pilot had committed. This was a ramming attack. Impact in 4 seconds. Chen kept firing. The upper forward turret poured rounds into the Ki-44's engine cowling. Impacts sparkled across the fighter's nose. The range collapsed to 300 yards. 200. The fighter trailed smoke but continued accelerating. 100 yards. At 12:22 p.m., the Ki-44 struck Aquila 52's number 3 engine. The impact sounded like a steel hammer slamming into a locomotive boiler. The fighter's propeller chewed into the engine cowling. Metal shrieked. The B-29 yawed violently to the right as the number 3 prop tore free and tumbled away into open sky. The fighter's wing sheared off. Its fuselage cartwheeled over the bomber's back and vanished. Shards of aluminum and steel rained past the gun turrets. Chen felt the entire aircraft shudder. Warning lights exploded across the flight engineer's panel. Number 3 engine fire. Number 4 engine oil pressure dropping. The aircraft commander shut down both right-side engines and activated the fire suppression system. Aquila 52 was now flying on 2 engines. The bomber slipped out of formation, losing altitude at 300 feet per minute. Alone. Damaged. A perfect target. 3 Ki-44s broke from their attack pattern and dove toward the crippled B-29. They had the altitude advantage. They had speed. Standard doctrine dictated that damaged bombers be destroyed quickly before they could jettison their payload and regain maneuverability. Chen rotated the upper turret toward the first attacker. The fighter was diving from 1 o'clock high. Range 1,000 yards and closing. He waited. The targeting computer required 3 seconds to calculate a firing solution against a maneuvering target. He forced himself not to fire early. 800 yards. The Ki-44's nose flared with cannon fire. Rounds punched through Aquila 52's left wing. Hydraulic fluid sprayed from severed lines. 600 yards. Chen fired. A 4-second burst. The tracers connected. The Ki-44's canopy exploded outward. The fighter rolled left and plunged downward, trailing fragments. 5th kill. The second attacker came in from 5 o'clock level. The tail gunner engaged first. His twin .50s hammered for 6 seconds. The Ki-44 flew through the tracer stream without visible damage and closed to 400 yards. Then the tail gunner's guns fell silent. Ammunition exhausted. Chen slaved the lower aft turret to his controls. The mechanical linkage responded sluggishly. Hydraulic pressure was bleeding away across every system. He tracked the fighter manually, led the target, and fired a 2-second burst. The round struck the Ki-44's left wing root. The wing folded upward. Structural failure. The fighter tumbled end over end and broke apart at 12,000 feet. 6th kill. But the third attacker had used the engagement as a diversion. A Ki-44 was now at 3 o'clock high, 300 yards out, wings level, nose pointed directly at Aquila 52's cockpit. The fighter's guns were silent. The pilot had spent his ammunition. Another ramming attempt. The right blister gunner opened fire. Rounds sparked off the Ki-44's engine. The fighter did not deviate. Chen swung the upper turret hard to the right. The mechanical stop screamed. He fired. The tracers passed high. He overcorrected and fired again. Hit stitched across the fighter's fuselage. The Ki-44 shuddered but held its course. Range 100 yards. 50. The fighter struck Aquila 52's number 1 engine. The propeller disintegrated. Shrapnel ripped through the wing. The number 1 fuel tank ruptured. Aviation gasoline sprayed into the slipstream. The Ki-44's fuselage split in half. The tail section flipped over the B-29's flight deck. The engine and cockpit smashed into the left wing, tearing a 6-foot hole in the leading edge. Aquila 52 now had 1 functioning engine. Number 2. The aircraft was falling through 18,000 feet. Airspeed dropped below 160 miles per hour. Fuel streamed from the damaged wing. The hydraulic system was failing. And 12 more Japanese fighters were assembling for a third wave of attacks. Chen's hands were numb. The temperature inside the unpressurized gun station had dropped to 62 below zero. His oxygen mask had frozen to his face. Ice crystals coated the optical sight. He scraped them away with a gloved thumb and tracked the incoming fighters. The 12 Ki-44s split into 3 groups of 4. Classic Wolfpack tactics. One group would feint high. Another would strike low. The third would exploit whichever defensive gap opened first. The tactic worked against healthy B-29s with full crews and functioning systems. Against a crippled bomber with failing hydraulics and partial gun coverage was execution. Aquila 52 dropped through 16,000 feet. The single remaining engine could no longer hold altitude with the shattered wing generating massive drag. The aircraft commander ordered everything non-essential thrown overboard. Ammunition cans, toolkits, survival gear. Every pound mattered now. The first group of 4 fighters dove in from 12 o'clock high. Chen engaged the lead aircraft at 900 yards. The upper turret responded sluggishly. Hydraulic pressure had fallen to 30%. He fired anyway. The recoil shuddered through the entire gun mount. Tracers arced upward toward the diving fighter. The Ki-44 jinked right. Chen tracked, fired again. The second burst tore into the fighter's left wing. Fabric skin peeled away, exposing internal structure. The wing folded. The aircraft snap-rolled and plunged downward. 7th kill. The remaining 3 fighters pressed their attack. They opened fire simultaneously at 600 yards. Cannon shells and machine gun rounds converged on Aquila 52 from 3 different angles. The bombardier's compartment was hit repeatedly. Plexiglass exploded outward. Frigid air screamed through the fuselage. The bombardier was killed instantly by a 20mm explosive round. Chen ignored the impacts. He swung the turret toward the second fighter. The targeting computer was dead. Hydraulic failure had disabled automatic compensation entirely. He aimed manually, leading the target by instinct and by experience earned across 11 missions. He fired. The burst struck low. Rounds sparked off the fighter's belly. The Ki-44 broke hard left and climbed away trailing smoke. A probable kill. Chen shifted to the third fighter. This one was closer. 400 yards and diving nearly vertical. Chen fired a 6-second burst. The gun barrels overheated despite the sub-zero air. Tracers stitched the sky. The Ki-44 flew straight through them. Impacts peppered the engine cowling. The propeller froze, then began to windmill. The fighter's nose dipped. It fell past Aquila 52's left wing at 200 miles per hour and vanished into the clouds below. 8th confirmed kill. The 4th fighter had used the chaos to line up a beam attack. It came in from 9 o'clock level. Range 500 yards. The left blister gunner opened fire with his twin .50s. The fighter jinked, closed to 300 yards, and fired a long cannon burst. Rounds ripped through Aquila 52's left horizontal stabilizer. Control cables snapped. The aircraft yawed violently. The rudder jammed hard left. The aircraft commander wrestled the controls, feeding in right aileron and reducing power on the lone functioning engine to arrest the yaw. Chen tracked the attacker as it passed beneath the fuselage and slaved the lower turret. The mechanical linkage groaned and stuttered. The turret rotated 15 degrees, then froze. Complete hydraulic failure. The tail gunner took the shot. His guns were mechanically operated. No hydraulics required. He fired a 4-second burst as the Ki-44 pulled up from its run. The round struck the fighter's tail. The rudder tore away. The Ki-44 entered an uncontrolled flat spin. 9th kill credited to Aquila 52's crew. The second wave of 4 fighters was already inbound. High-side attack from 2 o'clock. Aquila 52 was down to 14,000 feet and still descending. Airspeed 140 miles per hour. Critically slow. The bomber was nearing stall speed. One engine could not generate enough thrust to maintain controlled flight with the damaged wing and jammed rudder. Chen had 15 rounds left in the upper turret's ammunition belt. The lower turrets were offline. The blister positions were nearly empty. The tail gunner had maybe 60 rounds remaining. 4 more fighters were closing fast. The 4 Ki-44s split into 2 pairs. Experience had taught Japanese pilots that even crippled B-29s could still kill. Coordinated attacks from multiple angles were the safest approach. The first pair dove from 2 o'clock high. The second pair maneuvered for a follow-up attack from 4 o'clock level. Chen tracked the lead fighter in the first pair. Range 800 yards. The upper turret moved, but in jerks. Hydraulic fluid was leaking from ruptured lines throughout the aircraft. He waited until 700 yards, centered the sight, and fired his remaining 15 rounds in a single sustained burst. The tracers converged on the Ki-44's engine. Impacts flashed across the cowling. The propeller disintegrated. Shards of metal spun away. The engine seized. Smoke poured from the fighter as it rolled inverted and dropped out of sight. 10th kill. The upper turret clicked empty. Chen's primary defensive position was finished. He scrambled through the connecting tunnel toward the unpressurized rear section. The right blister gunner had taken shrapnel through the shoulder and could no longer operate his weapons. Chen took his place. The second fighter from the first pair was already in its dive. Range 600 yards. Chen gripped the manual controls of the twin .50 caliber guns. No computer. No hydraulic boost. Just raw strength to swing the weapons and hold aim. The Ki-44 opened fire at 400 yards. Cannon rounds punched through Aquila 52's right wing. Chen led the target and squeezed the trigger. Recoil slammed into his shoulders. Spent casings clattered into the collection bag. The burst tore into the fighter's cockpit. The canopy shattered. The Ki-44 snap-rolled left and spiraled downward. 11th kill. But the second pair was already committed. They attacked from 4 o'clock level, 300 yards apart, firing as they closed. One aimed for the flight deck. The other targeted the wing root where the fuel tanks sat. The tail gunner engaged the trailing fighter. His remaining ammunition poured out in a 5-second burst. Tracers walked across the Ki-44's nose. The windscreen exploded. The fighter pulled up hard and broke away. 12th kill confirmed when the aircraft was seen falling through the clouds at 11,000 feet with no visible pilot. The lead fighter pressed on. Chen swung his guns, but the angle was wrong. The blister position couldn't traverse far enough forward to engage a target at 4 o'clock high. He was blind. The left blister gunner fired. His position had better forward coverage. He emptied his last 30 rounds. The burst struck the Ki-44's left wing root. Fuel sprayed from ruptured fuel tanks. The fighter banked hard to the right in an attempt to break off, but the damaged wing couldn't tolerate the stress. Structural failure ripped through the wing spar. The wings separated cleanly. The fighter tumbled out of control. 13th kill. Aquila 52 had now shot down 13 Japanese fighters. 1 aircraft. 1 crew. 13 confirmed victories. But the count meant nothing to Chen. The B-29 was at 12,000 feet and still descending. The jammed rudder made controlled flight nearly impossible. The damaged wing was losing what little structural integrity remained. And a third wave of 4 fighters was inbound. These were the final attackers. Japanese fighter pilots operated under strict fuel limits. The Ki-44's combat radius was roughly 200 miles at combat power. The fighters had already been airborne for 40 minutes. They likely had 10 minutes of fuel left before they would be forced to disengage and return to Naramesu. 10 minutes was enough. The 4 Ki-44s formed into a tight line-astern formation. No diving attack. No high-side pass. They were setting up for sequential ramming runs. For fighters, 4 deliberate collisions. The pilots had calculated that even if only one connected, Aquila 52 would not survive. Chen watched them through the blister's small window. The fighters held 14,000 feet, 2 miles behind the bomber, matching speed and altitude, preparing for their final run. He had no ammunition left. The tail gunner was out. The upper turrets were offline. The lower turrets were offline. Aquila 52's defensive armament was exhausted. For fighters, 0 bullets. 12,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean. The lead Ki-44 accelerated. Range 1 mile. The fighter dipped slightly to build speed. Standard ramming doctrine called for an impact velocity of at least 300 miles per hour to guarantee structural failure. Slower collisions sometimes allowed bombers to limp away. Chen braced himself against the blister window frame. There was nothing left to do. No guns. No ammunition. No options. The aircraft commander attempted evasive maneuvers, but the jammed rudder stripped him of authority. The B-29 could bank gently left or right. It could not jink violently enough to spoil a fighter's aim. The Ki-44 closed to half a mile. Details snapped into focus. Dark green camouflage. The red Hinomaru on the fuselage. A yellow propeller spinner marking it as part of the 47th Sentai. The fighter's nose was perfectly centered on Aquila 52's vertical stabilizer. Impact in 15 seconds. Then black smoke streamed from the Ki-44's engine. Not combat damage. Mechanical failure. The Neima Ha-109 radial was notoriously temperamental at sustained high power. Cylinder head temperatures routinely exceeded design limits. Seizures were common. The propeller stopped. The engine failed completely. Without thrust, the Ki-44 couldn't hold its intercept course. It bled speed and altitude. The pilot attempted a restart. The fighter dropped beneath Aquila 52's tail, its ramming attack aborted by mechanical failure rather than gunfire. 14th kill credited to Aquila 52. No bullets fired. No gunner claimed it. But the fighter was combat lost, pushed beyond its limits by the battle. Intelligence officers would later confirm the Ki-44 crashed into the Pacific 18 miles east of Tokyo. The pilot did not survive. 14 confirmed kills. 1 B-29. 1 mission. The highest single mission total for any bomber in the Pacific theater. The remaining 3 fighters broke off their ramming runs. Fuel state was critical. They turned northwest toward Naramesu and climbed away. The fight was over. Aquila 52 had survived. But surviving at 12,000 feet over hostile territory on one engine was very different from surviving on the ground at Saipan. Chen crawled back through the connecting tunnel to help the flight engineer assess the damage. The list was catastrophic. Number 1 engine destroyed by ramming. Number 3 engine destroyed by ramming. Number 4 engine shut down due to oil pressure loss. Number 2 engine running, but with elevated cylinder head temperatures. Left wing structural damage. Right wing fuel leak. Hydraulic system at 15% capacity. Rudder jammed. Bombardier killed. Right blister gunner critically wounded. Radio compass damaged. 1 life raft destroyed by cannon fire. Distance to Saipan, 1,512 miles. Estimated flight time at current airspeed, 11 hours. Fuel remaining, 9 hours at best, assuming number 2 engine didn't fail. The math didn't work. The flight engineer proposed a solution. Restart number 4 engine. It had been shut down after the first ramming attack due to low oil pressure. Not destroyed. Not catastrophically damaged. Just a precautionary shutdown. Running it without sufficient oil would destroy the engine within 30 minutes. But 30 minutes of additional thrust might raise airspeed enough to reduce overall fuel burn and extend their range. The aircraft commander approved it. Number 4 engine caught, and began running rough, but it produced thrust. Aquila 52 accelerated to 170 miles per hour. Still far below normal cruise speed, but enough to slow the descent. The bomber leveled off at 10,000 feet. The formation had continued on to Tokyo without them. The mission had been completed. Bombs had been dropped. Other B-29s were already turning south for the long flight back to Saipan. Aquila 52 was alone over the Pacific with 2 damaged engines, failing systems, and insufficient fuel. Chen helped move the wounded blister gunner into a more stable position and applied pressure bandages to the shrapnel wounds. The morphine syrettes in the first aid kit were frozen solid. Pain management was impossible. The gunner remained conscious but was losing blood. 11 hours to Saipan. If they made it at all. At 14:20 hours, exactly 28 minutes after restart, number 4 engine failed. Cylinder head temperatures had exceeded tolerance. Internal components seized. The propeller windmilled for 6 seconds, then stopped completely. The aircraft commander feathered it to reduce drag and cut fuel flow. Aquila 52 was back to one engine. Altitude began falling immediately. 10,000 feet, 9,500, 9,000. The single Curtiss-Wright radial in the number 2 position was now solely responsible for keeping 32 tons of damaged bomber in the air. The navigator ran the numbers again. 7 hours of flight time remained. Distance to Saipan was still 900 miles. The math was still impossible. The flight engineer suggested dumping the bomb bay fuel tanks. These auxiliary tanks had been installed to extend the B-29's range on long missions over Japan. They were now empty, but the structures themselves still weighed roughly 400 pounds. Dead weight. No purpose. The tanks were jettisoned at 14:45. The bomber climbed slightly, clawing back 100 feet of altitude. Fuel calculations improved by 6 minutes. Still nowhere near enough. Chen stayed at the right blister with the wounded gunner. The bleeding had slowed, but the man was slipping into shock. Core body temperature was dropping fast in the unpressurized fuselage. Chen stripped out his own heated flight suit liner and wrapped it around the gunner. The liner's electric heating elements were still working, battery-powered and independent of the aircraft's failing systems. At 1500 hours, the navigator identified a possible alternative. Iwo Jima. The island lay 640 miles from their position. Marine forces hadn't invaded yet. It was still held by Japanese troops, but American submarines sometimes surfaced near Iwo Jima to rescue downed B-29 crews. If Aquila 52 could reach the surrounding waters and ditch successfully, a submarine might recover them. The aircraft commander rejected the idea. Ditching a B-29 in open ocean had a survival rate of about 40%. Ditching one with severe wing damage and a jammed rudder would be far worse. The bomber would likely break apart on impact. Even if the crew survived the ditching, they would be in hostile waters with limited survival gear. The decision was made to continue toward Saipan. At 1600 hours, Aquila 52 crossed the international date line. The navigator marked their position. 700 miles to Saipan. Fuel for 5 hours and 40 minutes. The gap was shrinking, but it still favored fuel exhaustion before landfall. The flight engineer began shutting down non-essential electrical systems. Navigation lights, cockpit instruments, heating elements, interior lighting. Every system drew power from generators driven by the remaining engine. Less electrical load meant less drag. Less drag meant marginally better fuel economy. The temperature inside the aircraft dropped to -40 degrees. At 1730, the B-29 formation that had completed the Tokyo mission passed overhead at 18,000 feet. Tight formation. All engines running. Airspeed 270 miles per hour. They would reach Saipan in about 4 hours. Aquila 52 was making 160 miles per hour at 8,000 feet. Estimated time to Saipan, 7 hours. Fuel exhaustion was projected in 4 hours and 50 minutes. At 1800 hours, the right blister gunner lost consciousness. His breathing was shallow. Pulse weak. Chen stayed with him, but there were no medical supplies left beyond the frozen morphine syrettes and the pressure bandages already in place. At 1845, the number 2 engine began running rough. Cylinder head temperatures crept into the red. Oil pressure fluctuated. The engine had been operating at maximum continuous power for nearly 7 hours. Curtiss-Wright R-3350 radials were rated for 4 hours under normal conditions. These were anything but normal. The flight engineer reduced power slightly to preserve the engine. Airspeed fell to 150 miles per hour. Fuel consumption improved, but time to destination increased. At 1900 hours, the navigator calculated their distance to Saipan at 400 miles. Fuel remaining 3 hours and 20 minutes. The math still didn't work, but the margin was tightening. At 2000 hours, the right blister gunner stopped breathing. Chen attempted resuscitation. The frozen air and heavy flight suit made chest compressions nearly impossible. After 4 minutes, the flight engineer called time of death. The body was left in place. Moving it served no purpose and drained energy the crew desperately needed. The number 2 engine kept running. Cylinder head temperatures stayed in the red. Oil pressure fluctuated between 40 and 60 pounds per square inch. Minimum acceptable pressure was 50. The engine was operating on the edge of catastrophic failure. At 2100 hours, the navigator spotted navigation lights. A U.S. Navy destroyer was visible 20 miles east, running a patrol south of Iwo Jima. It couldn't help them, but its presence confirmed the navigator's position fix was accurate. At 2145, fuel gauges showed 30 minutes remaining. Distance to Saipan was 120 miles. Time to destination at current airspeed was 48 minutes. The gap still hadn't closed. The flight engineer transferred every remaining drop of fuel to the number 2 engine's tank. Wing tanks, cross-feed valves, emergency systems. All aviation gasoline was routed to the single functioning engine. At 2200 hours, Aquila 52 was 60 miles from Saipan. Fuel gauges read 15 minutes. The navigator could see the runway lights at Isley Field on the southern end of the island. Distance 8 miles. Altitude 4,000 feet and descending. The number 2 engine coughed. Fuel starvation. It caught again, ran smoothly for 20 seconds, then coughed once more. The propeller windmilled. The engine restarted. Power surged and faded. 3 miles from the runway. 2,000 feet. The tower at Isley Field cleared Aquila 52 for an emergency landing. Crash crews were already in position. Ambulances lined the runway. The landing gear would not extend. Hydraulic failure. The flight engineer tried manual extension with the emergency hand crank. The nose gear dropped. The left main gear locked into place. The right main gear stayed retracted, damaged during the fighter attacks. 1 mile from the runway. 1,000 feet. The number 2 engine quit completely. Fuel exhaustion. The propeller stopped. Aquila 52 became a glider. 32 tons of aluminum and steel. No power. Asymmetric landing gear. The aircraft commander aimed for the runway. Airspeed 130 miles per hour. Descent rate 800 feet per minute. Too fast. Too steep. The B-29 crossed the threshold at 300 feet. Still too high. The bomber touched down halfway down the runway at 110 miles per hour. The left main gear collapsed instantly. The aircraft slewed left. The left wing struck the runway. Metal screamed. Sparks erupted. Aquila 52 skidded 1,500 feet and came to rest in the dirt beside the runway. All surviving crew evacuated through the rear escape hatch. 10 men made it out. The bombardier and the right blister gunner did not survive. The aircraft was declared a total loss. Structural damage was beyond repair. Aquila 52 had flown 1,512 miles on one engine. Shot down 14 Japanese fighters in a single mission. Survived 2 ramming attacks. And brought 10 men home. If this story moved you, help us keep these memories alive. Hit the like button. Every like helps this story reach more people. Subscribe and turn on notifications if you haven't already. We're pulling forgotten stories from the archives every day. Stories of crews who fought with frozen .50 caliber guns, failing machines, and sheer determination. Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from. The United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia. Our community spans the world. You're not just watching history, you're helping preserve it. Thank you for being here. And thank you for making sure Chen and the crew of Aquila 52 are not lost to silence. These men deserve to be remembered.